I'm going to give more of a breakdown of what I mean by not debting, which is the number one tool we use to get out of debt, is bizarrely to stop debting. It sounds quite revolutionary to those of us who've been in the habit of borrowing all the time. We don't realise until we absolutely stop how dependent we are on borrowing off people. And this can be in the shape of the first one, which is very popular, is friends. Oh, you couldn't, sorry, this is my dog Fred. The borrowing of friends is something that, again, we do as a habit. We all know someone who's constantly turning up with an empty pocket, with, the wallet has only got foreign currency in it, something, and someone else pays. It's maybe to get home. There's always a crisis. It's always like, just stump this up till Friday, till payday. It can be the form of, oh, I need to get a present for my mum. Can you lend me? Can you lend me money? And it's often small amounts, but it can grow to massive amounts. And I'll get into that further down the line. But at this point, it's just try to stop borrowing anything from anybody for at least 24 hours. So it's now 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Let's see whether by 4 o'clock tomorrow you can have gone 24 hours without borrowing whatsoever. And it might be quite interesting to see the habits, both language-wise and attitude, please can I borrow some money? All these different ways we have that we've just got used to being into, and we need to stop that completely. That's number one. Friends, and tell your friends, say to your friends, I'm going to try and go through Lent at the moment, it's the middle of Lent, or a week or a day, whatever you like, and say, I'm going to see whether I can do all of this without borrowing off you at all, and see your friend's reaction. And if they sort of go like that, that means that you've been doing it a lot and they kind of don't believe it's going to happen. Then we have number two, overdrafts. And this again is a little bit more complicated than it looks. It doesn't mean you pay off your overdraft. Your overdraft might be massive. That's not the issue. The issue is stop using it. So every time you just pay off a little bit and then you go back to using the remaining bit. So let's say your overdraft is £2,000 and you've been living in that overdraft forever. You get to the point where you've just paid off £200, so you've got £1,800 as your overdraft. You've technically got £200 you could get overdrawn again. You could use that £200, but it's not your money, it's still debt. So stop using that. When it comes to getting maybe your salary put into your bank, which pays off the overdraft, let's say the first of the month. And then by the middle of the month, oh no, I've got to go back into my overdraft again. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you start the beginning of the month with £2,000 overdraft, by the end of the month, it's going to be no more, hopefully, £1,999 overdrawn. You've paid off £1 towards it, but you haven't increased it. This can be very a sort of simple way. It depends where you are in the world, but in this country you can get bank accounts for nothing. They are free, or a savings account. So what I would suggest to someone who finds this very confusing, open another bank account and put your salary into that account, have it paid in there, and then put £1 towards your overdraft that you have been using. Sounds a bit complicated? Again, I'll go into more detail about how you can do that later. But if you cannot use that overdraft ever again, not increase it from today, not ever have your overdraft more overdrawn than it is today, ever, you will get out of debt. Absolutely guaranteed. It doesn't affect your credit rating. This is another big myth that has to be busted. Not using your credit card, not using your overdraft, not borrowing money does not affect your credit rating. I haven't borrowed money for, oh, I don't know, I think I'm in my 3rd decade. I've got the top credit rating. I don't use it. I don't need it. People want to lend me money all the time. I spend most of my energy saying no thank you because I have the money. And I started off with nothing, minus. I had my card taken off me by the bank. I was so overdrawn. It was just such a mess. But again, that's be part of what you'll hear more further down the line. But for now, it's really, really important to stop borrowing, and borrowing is your overdraft. And we have terms like credit and debt, I'll come back to this again and again, that are interchangeable in banking terms. Every time you get credit, you're not getting credit, you're getting debt. Every time you take out another overdraft, you're actually taking out more debt, but it's called credit. It's very confusing. I still find it confusing. I have to do a double think all the time. My debit card is actually my credit card, and I don't have a credit card, which should actually be called a debt card, but I don't have it. I got rid of them ages ago. So number 3 is your credit cards. Now, I include in that all forms of credit card, including store cards. There's various different cards that you can get that allow you to borrow money. And again, they should be called debt store cards. They should be called debt cards, not credit cards. So this, again, to most people in debt will sound a bit like speaking Latin. But credit cards vary in the amount of money you have to pay back, or the cost of borrowing money. So let's say you have £100 you take out on one credit card, and you're paying interest of maybe 10%, which actually very few would be doing that. You're actually paying back £110. So you go to a sale and you go, oh my God, look, that item has dropped from £100 to £90. I have to buy it now before I lose that sale. I have to. Actually, you're going to be paying the full rate because you're going to be paying the interest on the money you've paid. And I'll talk about interest a bit more further down the line. I mean, you can read up about it if you want to, but for now, you just have to understand it costs a lot to apparently save money. And it's a big delusional way of thinking that many of us have. Oh, if I buy that now, I'm saving X, Y, and Z. You're not. Because by the time you've paid the interest back, you're often paying way more than if you'd saved up and got the market price. Credit cards often set up to be an emergency backdrop. I need my credit card for an emergency. Well, I would suggest you look through your statements for, say, the last 3 months, the last 6 months. You might never have ever looked at them before, and actually tick off and be very honest with yourself. Tick off in red the amount of things you've actually bought on your credit card that were an emergency. I think you'll find they're very, very few indeed. But the amount of stuff that isn't an emergency, that you're not only paying for on the credit card, but you're also paying for them. There are times when credit cards, and I won't name the brands, but let's say some brands that may be connected with America, they can go up to 50% or more. So every time you spend £100 on that pair of shoes, you're actually paying £150. That's what 50% of £100 is. If you don't pay that off by the 2nd, 3rd, 4th month or a year, you can already be leaping up into thousands to save to buy yourself that £100 pair of shoes that you have decided is an emergency. In my experience, the more credit cards I have, the more likely there is that I need to have them for an emergency. When I don't have any other credit cards, it's amazing how creative I can be to get myself out an emergency. It really is. I can really start thinking differently, behaving differently when I start to go, I haven't got the use of the credit cards or store cards or any other type of card where you can borrow. There's always new innovations of how we can be encouraged, supported in getting into debt. And the more I can learn about how I think and how I behave around the debt, the less susceptible I am to all that nonsense. I don't borrow. I don't use credit cards. I don't have store cards. I don't have any type of card or tool, as it were, where I can get into debt. I can get one. Oh my goodness, I feel the sharks swimming around me trying to find ways of getting me to get credit cards, because I am actually very wealthy. It might not look like it, but I am. So get rid of, now there's stages, because I don't want to terrify people. I would say the end result is get rid of them. But the first thing you can do is stop using them. Absolutely stop using them. And there's various different methods. One is to, put them in a drawer, which is a bit susceptible. Another one of my favorites is to put them into a bowl of water and then put that in the deep freeze so it's frozen into the water. Because you can't put the credit card in the microwave without killing it, you have to wait for the ice to melt. And that gives you some waiting time where your head's going, I've got to use it, I've got to use it, I've got to use it, I've got to use it. If you have to wait for that bowl of water to melt and then you can use your credit card, you might find yourself going, actually, I don't have to use it. What about if I tried that? What about if I thought of that? I had someone call me from a gas station saying she had to use her credit card. And I said, well, you don't. You could push the car to the side of the forecourt, leave your keys behind the till and walk home. Get your debit card, get your cash, whatever it is, and come back to the forecourt. She was furious with me. Why do you think I should walk? And I went, well, it'll remind you next time to make sure you have the cash to put petrol in your car. And if the amount of cash you've got is £5, that's what you put in the car. You don't just fill it up and go, bring out whatever card you've got and use your credit card again. We don't want you ever to use that credit card again. Eventually, as your confidence in what I'm suggesting starts to build up, you will get to the point where you'll be able to actually destroy those credit cards, write to the credit card company, as I did, and I had to do it more than once, and say, do not ever send me a free credit card again. Do not ever try and sell me one. Do not ever ask me whether I want one. Absolutely out of the question. It took a long time. They're supposed to listen to you the first time, but they don't. So I don't have credit cards and I haven't had them for a very long time. It has not affected my credit rating, which is the big, red flag that they try and throw at you. Well, whoever they are. It is put in the press, it is put in the media that you have to use your credit cards in order to have a good credit rating. Rubbish. Rubbish. I'm in the very, very, very pale green. It's so pale that it's almost white, which is the most you can get on your credit rating. And I haven't had credit cards for years, or store cards, or well, there's new ones now coming out. There's another company where you can buy clothes and things completely free, no down payment, and in 3 months you paid this amount and another, you pay it off a period of time, which is fine. However, if you default on any of those payments, your interest goes woof. So that's not pushed so much as you can buy now and pay later. If you fail to pay later, if there's a glitch in your financial system, you pay a lot later. And I don't think it works. I personally don't even go close to that. I don't need to today because I stopped. And I'm not saying it's easy, it's incredibly difficult. Our credit cards have been our sort of security blanket. They've been our running away money. When I realised I was £56,500 in debt, no income, about to be evicted, and I was told, it was suggested to me I get rid of my credit cards. I was like, no, 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 I don't have a problem with my credit cards. You know, I'm not going to pay them back. And I kept them I didn't put them in a bowl of ice, but I did keep them in the fridge. And then one day I was having a very low day and I got them out and I totaled up the amount of money I could borrow on those cards, how much I could get into debt with those cards. It was £8,500. And instantly it went through my brain, I could jump on a plane and go somewhere else on that kind of money. I could go somewhere else. I could live somewhere else on these cards. And I suddenly went, oh shit. Because I had actually been doing quite well. I'd slowly been coming out of debt. And I suddenly went, oh shit, that's the temptation. In a weak moment, I would create an emergency and I would suddenly need to leave the country. So I would say, the best you can, stop using them first. Do that for the next 24 hours. Stop using your credit cards. Leave them at home, put them in a drawer, whatever you can. And we'll look at what happens if you are massively in debt on your credit cards later. But for now, give yourself, just say, what would it be like to live without them for 24 hours? And listen to that emotional response. My God, that's terrifying. That's awful. To have one's future, one's life hung up on cards that are just bits of plastic. It's crazy. But it's what I did, and it's what most of the people I work with do. We mortgage our future to this. So then the next one is family. Oh, I love this one. So this has in the UK become illegal now to use financial coercive control. And this is assumed to be connected with domestic violence, which it often is. But I find that I have many people I work with who don't even realise the incredible, I don't know what, it's not really a skill, but their ability to get money out of family members is extraordinary. And it takes one guy, he was an award-winning Something Terribly Important, and I worked with him not that long. He found it too shocking and he left, but it took him a few months to realise he, as a grown-up adult, first-class degree from university, awards all over the place for what he did, was actually living off his mother, who was an assistant in a primary school. She was an assistant, I think it was called caterer or something. She basically washed dishes. He was living off her. He'd been living off her for years. Her total annual income was somewhere in the region of 14,000 a year. He was living off her. Absolutely no idea. Clueless. Now you could say she could take some responsibility for that, but I'm not dealing with I'm dealing with him. And I said to him, how do you feel about that? And he was mortified. I said, would you be prepared to do something else to make up that money, or to start the slow process of actually becoming financially independent, have your own agency of your own life? And it was at that point he looked startled. He said he was prepared, but I never saw him again. So I don't know what happened. But living off family members, whatever their shortcomings might be, however lovely they might be, however wealthy they might be. I had another person, she was living in a very expensive flat. She had all her bills paid for by daddy. Her flat was paid for by daddy. She had all the clothes you could possibly want, and she had bags, loads of bags. She could meet people for lunch all the time. And it was very interesting. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And over a period of time, I realised her mother took her shopping on a Saturday. Every Saturday she went shopping, where she got more clothes, more bags, more this. She had a lovely time. And then on the Saturday evening, she'd go for dinner in a very expensive restaurant where she was kind of on show, as it were, as the fabulous daughter. She had no income of her own whatsoever. And at the end of that, she went home with her father, who made love to her. So she was involved in an incestuous relationship on so many levels. And for her to break away from that was more than just breaking away from her father. She would lose her home, and her mother was obviously colluding in it. That took quite some unpicking and took a bit of time, but eventually managed to get her, and she was prepared to do it by this time, to move into quite a grotty studio, which she then financed herself. But her self-esteem went through the roof. But she had to deal with a very, very angry parent, a lot of abuse from brothers who didn't know, apparently. And all the finery. I think she kept most of it in the studio. Some of it she sold, but all the finery actually became in her head no longer of value. She didn't want to have it anymore. So these are sort of levels where your family can be horrific, and you can feel they owe you. They are such a bastard, they should give me the money. That might be the case. Crack on, but it doesn't work long term. Or you can say, well, they love giving me money. They're very happy giving me money. Well, that's fine. But are you happy with that? Because it's not working. You're still in debt. You're still borrowing all over the place. You're still feeling really bad because you're the baby in the situation, even if you're in your 50s. And I've seen that happening. So to stop borrowing in the small scale to start off with, because you might not even see the extent to which you're dependent on family members. It could be a partner. You know, oh, my wife's always bailing me out. She's always got a fiver in her pocket. Or the other way around. Oh, my husband deals with all the finances. He just gives me 100 quid a week to spend on me and the kids. Okay. And what do you spend that on? And how does that work? And who has the power to make choices? Where do you go on holiday? How does this all work? Oh, I don't know. I just know I have to keep borrowing off him because it's not enough. Okay, so what is enough? Oh, don't know. Start off by stop borrowing. If you are a partner in a relationship and you are looking after 2 small children, it's a salary. And you can go to your partner and say, I want a salary for this, whatever it might be. If your partner doesn't earn that much, it might not be very much, but you start engaging with what your life actually costs. If you're, which happened to someone I was working with only 3 years ago, partner suddenly dies, out of the blue. Poof. Everything's gone. Home, apartment, child still got to be fed, child still got to be looked after, taken care of, and there's no income, nobody knows where the money is, partner's gone. What do you do? Well, you have to put on your big girl pants and find a way of doing something. Don't wait until that point. See what happens before that. If your partner's very reluctant for you to have any information on what he's doing, find out why. What's the background to that? The other one I see, which I have seen, it's actually rarer, but it's becoming apparently more common, is parents demanding money off their children, demanding the child starts paying for the mortgage, the bills, the car, the holidays. It comes in many, many different guises. And that is not fair on anybody. It's not right. And I would much rather, which I have seen, people who have been utterly dependent and bullying and manipulative, turning into very self-sufficient, very personable, very full of confidence and assurance about where they're going and what they're doing, whether it's a parent or not. And that's quite a hard habit to break. I had a brother, for instance, who used my name. He said I was a mug and I wasn't going to use it for anything else, which he might have had a point, I don't know. But he used it to put me down as a director from many, many different companies that were scams. And I was a director of these companies without knowing. Is that borrowing? Yeah. Is it with my permission? No. I was completely and utterly shocked when I found out. But there are shades of that, whether it's extreme or whether it's small, where people are, will scam you under the guise of helping you, borrowing from you. You're setting up them in a company, you're setting up them in a flat. There's so many different ways of doing it, and the best way to steer clear of all of it is just stop borrowing from anybody, and particularly those nearest and dearest to you, and see how the relationship is set up when you stop being financially bridged with them. If you're not borrowing from them, if they're not borrowing from you, if there's not this vague exchange of some sort of, well, you did that 6 years ago, well, I did that this week. If there's no borrowing at all, what is left of the relationship? Are you able to talk freely about other things? Are you able to make choices about what you want to do and where you want to go without a family member, stroke partner, stroke parent, grandparent, uncles and aunties? I've got someone whose uncle is making every single effort imaginable to move in on her and her husband's family home. Decides he's too ill to live on his own. He's been fine for years. He still is. He's not an old man. But he's like, oh, I need someone to look after me. You've got a spare room. And helping her to say no, when actually this uncle has lent her money in the past, is of course quite a challenge. If she hadn't borrowed the money, it would be much more black and white, which it is really. But in her mind, she's like, oh, well, he did help out with this. Well, okay. Set up a process where you're paying him back, even if it's in tiny amounts, but he ain't moving into your home. It's not going to happen. So these are sort of things that I think are really important when it comes to being aware of how much we borrow from family, which is not the same as being with a family. Being with a family is there's a kind of mutual exchange. So it's not like I will appear in the family mansion and just with my presence you will give me £1,000. It's like, am I doing the washing up? Am I doing the ironing? Am I coming down and having a clean up every weekend? Or am I just popping in, dropping off my stuff, taking a £5 and going down to the pub with my mates? Whatever it is. And as I say, this is not perfect in the beginning, but just stop doing it for the next 24 hours. And that might give you a hint of how much you do it. And that's really helpful information. It really is. It doesn't mean you're good or bad. So you fall into a habit that is no longer working, because you can see by the history that there's a lot of debt. So, yeah, and then the fifth one is the one that is off. It's a very dark one, and it's the one often that people come to me when they're even in problems with this, which is, I'll generically call it loan sharks. They are people who, it's completely illegal, who you might not know, or you might know slightly. You might know them from down the street where you live, or someone at work, who lend you the money you've asked for. Sometimes it's very small amounts to start off with, and sometimes it's quite normal. There'll be a little bit of a paper that's a contract which says that for every, I'm going to exaggerate slightly, but for every £1 you borrow, you have to pay £1,000 back. Why would you do that? Because you're not used to reading contracts. You don't think clearly. You think, oh, they don't mean that. It'll be all right. I use myself here as an example, go into some sort of, oh, I don't really know what you're saying. And over a period of time, of course, you can't make those payments. They become unattainable. That's why you borrowed the £1 in the first place, because you didn't have any spare. So over a period of time, you're finding that you're paying more and more and more. They want more and more and more. And of course, you've got less and less and less. Nothing's changed. You still haven't got the money. So you can end up by owing them a fortune, not having it, needing more money, and you think, why did I borrow that pound in the first place? Well, that's the habit. That's the habit we're trying to break. So for instance, if let's say me, I was in a situation where I had rented a property, I'd sublet it to somebody else, I hadn't done it properly, the legal papers weren't legit, I thought they were, and after 4 years, that person left, and I was left holding the baby. He hadn't paid any bills, which I think, my memory serves me, were about £13,000. My immediate thought was, oh shit, I haven't got it. They, whoever they are going to come and kill me. I'll go down the road and go to, it was semi-legit, it was in a shop, it was called Payday Loan, same thing. So I was like, oh, I'll go down there, and that'll get them off my back, whoever them were. There's 13,000, and I went into a blind panic about it. And fortunately, I had a mate who said, don't be stupid, just don't pay it. Let's see what happens. Let's unpick it. Let's negotiate with them. Leave these loan sharks, I'll use that word collectively, out of the picture. It'll just complicate things. So I did. I just went, okay. So I contacted it took me a long time. I found it very, very scary. But bit by bit, I started to contact all the people that were owed this money. And they were coming back saying, nope, you still owe it. Nope, you still owe it. This sublease that you did isn't recognisable in law. And I wanted to go to the loan shark. I just thought, get rid of them. Get them off my back. But that 13,000, I think it took over a year, but it never got more. It stayed as the figure 13,000. And I think some of them I was literally paying like £1 at a time. But I was like, I'm never going to be able to pay this back. And I got to the point where I got some advice. And they said, actually, this is a business failure. It's not your personal debt. It's to do with the business. You don't have to pay it. I was like, what? I had no idea. I was clueless. But with her help, she drafted out a very simple letter, and that was it. I didn't pay it back. It was wiped off, and it was considered a business failure. Now, I don't have to be a lawyer. I just had to trust that me borrowing from an even more dangerous area would only make things worse. And I had by that time got that into my head. If I keep borrowing from more and more extreme lenders, it's just going to get worse, whatever it is. So the loan sharks, I have had, it happens enough times for me to know it's an issue. I had another woman, very, very high earner, chronically in debt. I mean, she was such a mess. And she had got involved with loan sharks about 5 years previously. So on paper, she owed thousands and thousands and thousands. And I think she'd borrowed like 500 quid at some point. And she had men at her door with guns. She had people following her down the corridor with knives. It was really horrific. And she was in her, I think she was in her mid-50s, little woman, absolutely terrified. And she was so terrified she could barely remember her name. I mean, it was really, really scary. I didn't meet them. But I had to sit with her little bit by little bit, unpicking what had happened, how it was. And she found it very, very difficult to completely stop spending. And in that case, which is very, very rare, and I don't normally recommend it, I did suggest to her that she borrow from somewhere else legitimate, pay off the loan sharks, this obscene amount of money, and then bit by bit pay off from the legitimate companies. I don't recommend that usually, but in this case, it was just crazy. This sort of lending, so their side, is illegal. But most people who get into such a dark space, 1, don't know that. 2, are terrified anyway. 3, who do you go to? Police don't give a shit. What do you do? Well, there are various organisations you can go to. But you have to stop borrowing and being in this sort of whirligig mess mentally in order to unpick it and get the information and get yourself sorted out. And these sort of loans are horrific. And I've seen, it was around one of the big roundabouts in London, this huge billboard, I think it was a couple of years ago. And it was one of the very legitimate banks, apparently, known high street brands. And it had some sort of card being issued. And on the roundabout, it was small writing, but actually it was quite big writing, but you had to sort of really look. It said APR, which is the interest rate they're going to charge on an annual basis, not a one-off payment. This is an annual. So each year you don't pay it, you're paying more. It was somewhere in the region of 4,000%. So do it on your calculator. £100 times 4,000, and that's on 1 year. And if you're so desperate that you need that £100, that you're prepared to sign up to make those massive repayments, you're in trouble. You're very unlikely to be able to pay that £4,000 as well. So don't pay the 100. Deal with the hassle, the aggro, the embarrassment. Sometimes we're embarrassed not to say, I haven't got the £100. You go for a meal with somebody, with a whole group of friends, and then one of them turns around and says, oh, it's your birthday. One of the guests, oh, it's your birthday. We're all going to pay for your meal. You're sitting there going, I had a salad because I know I've only got a £5. I can't contribute a meal where everybody else is paying 150 quid. That's when you've got to put your big girl pants on, or boys' pants on, and say, ain't got it. And of course, if you haven't got a credit card, you can't say, I'll put it on the card. And if you've got the cash that you brought with you and you go, that's what I've got, happy birthday, but that's all I've got, you're very, very unlikely to get into debt. You will be embarrassed. It will be uncomfortable. It might be a tiny bit shaming, or certainly some others might try and shame you. You can sit there and go, that's not what I signed up for when I came out for a meal. When I go on holiday for 2 weeks, I have £250, whatever it is, that I've got in cash. I've signed up for it. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going on holiday. I've paid for it. Suddenly it's like, oh, let's go water skiing, helicopter driving, I've been there. You sort of go, nope. Oh, why not? It'd be such fun. Yeah, I'm sure it would be. Next year I might be able to be up for it, but this year, nope. Going swimming, going to sunbathe, going to do whatever it was I planned to do. Oh God, you're such a wet blanket. If we all did it, it would only cost £500 each. Yeah, it might be, but I ain't got that £500. Oh, look, I'll pay it for you. You can pay me back when we get home. No, mate, I don't do that anymore. This is why a lot of these things I'm suggesting are much harder than they look, because actually they've got to change the way I behave with other people, the way I talk, the way I express myself, the way I am around situations. And there's got to be quite a lot of, no, I don't do that anymore, or I don't choose to do that anymore. And certain people, not everyone, it'll feel like everybody, but certain people will try and push very, very hard and say, oh, come on, come and do this. It'll only cost you this, and I'll lend you the money. I was like, I'm already 68,000 pounds of debt. I'm already in that debt. Why would I want another 500 to add for a helicopter ride that I didn't plan for and I'm not going to enjoy? No. So this, as I say, is like a step ladder that I have seen people get into, and the bottom of that step ladder, it should be steps anyway, the very, very bottom is people at your door, is the bailiffs, is the loan sharks, is the every time you go out of your door, you run past the landlord, you run past the shop that you owe money to, you try and evade, a family member who you owe money to. That becomes really awful and makes, in my case, my life untenable. It's just grim. Whereas if I can stand up straight and go, I'm not borrowing any money as of, go on, that's the dog gone, it's bored with my conversation. That's the point where I can say, today I'm not borrowing ever again. And it's going to be a bumpy ride for a little bit. And I promise you it is a little bit. If you stop it dead, it's amazing how the world conspires to help you. And you suddenly go, oh my God, I could do that. I could think about that. I could do things differently in that area. One of the things a lot of these debting organisations that I read about and I'm asked to come and have a chat to, they suggest you pay off your debt first. I think that's a disaster. That's a disaster. If you pay your debt off first, you're not changing your behaviour, you're not changing your thinking, you're getting more desperate, you're getting more depressed, more confused. Whereas if I stop debting completely and I see, directly in front of my face, this is what I do, this is how I think, this is how I talk, all this I need to change, I have kind of a breathing space to go, oh, okay. Now I can start looking at different ways of actually leading my life, which is what I wanted to do, but I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't want to live in debt. I didn't want to borrow money. I just kept on creating situations where I had to, again and again and again and again. A boiler blew up on Monday last week. It didn't blow up, but it went wrong. Tuesday, I was there with the gas engineer, and it's going to cost £2,850. Now, in the old days, that would have just brought me crashing down. I've got that money set aside in savings. The boiler's going to be installed, replaced, do whatever they need to do on Wednesday. Just over a week. That's amazing. For me, that is amazing. There is no crisis today. I had a car crash last year. Car was written off. I gave myself 10 days, mainly because I was really jittery. And after 10 days, I got another one for cash. I don't do financial mess ups because of crises now. Crises are never financial anymore. Have a car, have the boiler crash, have this, have that. It is annoying today. Today it is, the car. But I have the money set aside. I don't need credit cards. I don't need, interest free. That's another great joke. I don't need to do part payments. I don't need to do any of that today. I can sit down and just go, I didn't want to spend the money on a new boiler, but it's there. And therefore it's going to cost exactly that amount. And by Thursday evening, problem solved, money paid. And I can look at other ways of starting to slowly build up the savings again for it to happen again, because some form of emergency does always happen. But today I don't use credit cards, I don't use family, I don't use my friends, I don't use loan sharks, I don't have to have an overdraft. I found out today, because I rang up to be clear, because I knew I was doing this, I have an overdraft facility of £2,000, which I have to pay, I can't remember, I think it's £35 a day if I use it. But I don't have to use it. I choose not to use it. I choose to make sure on a daily basis that there's more than enough money for the next day's bills rather than use it. And that was something I felt a bit bad. I thought, why am I not clear about this in my head? I was like, So I said, well, if I go into my overdraft, what happens? And he immediately said, you will get a text in the morning telling you. So, oh, that's brilliant. But I choose not to use it. And when I said, if I want to get rid of my overdraft, what do I need, you know, as in not have it anymore? And he said, I wouldn't advise it. He said, have a think about it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll reduce it to 50 quid. I don't know. I'll have a think about it and I'll sort it out, because I've never used it. It's just been there. But it can be quite confusing when you ring up and the machine says you have a balance of, and I think today it was £4,500, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. And I realised they were factoring in my overdraft facility, which I don't. So actually my balance is £2,500. So I hope this hasn't been too mind-boggling, but it's better to be boggled a little bit and just try and do it, and you won't get it perfect. But if you start off with it's 4:30 now, and just say to yourself, by 4:30 tomorrow, I'm going to make every effort not to borrow in any shape or form. I'm not going to use my, and that includes things like, we often put our credit cards on our Amazon accounts, so that when we buy something on Amazon, we're going, no, we bought that for cash. No, you didn't buy it for cash. You bought it on your credit card. If you want to, change that to your debit card so you're much clearer. Same with eBay, all these different accounts that we have now, which are very, very confusing. If you get those switched over all onto a debit card and then cancel your credit card, delete it every which way you can, and it won't be perfect, it just isn't. After a period of time, slowly, I started to see how much, in my own peculiar way, I was borrowing money. And the only thing you can do when you borrow money is to get more into debt. If you stop borrowing, eventually, and it feels like forever, you will come out of debt. It's guaranteed. So there will be a lot more. I'll be talking about this and more in more and more detail. If you do have any questions, and they might just be cross questions, which is fine. I was very cross for a long time when I started to do this. Go on to the, subscribe if you can, but go on to the YouTube site of The Debtologist, and please put the questions in there, because I would like to see how much you're getting this, or how complicated I'm being or simple I'm being. So again, for me, I needed a Lady Bird book guy on what does it mean to stop debting one day at a time. What does that mean? I didn't really understand. And I hope I've begun a bit of a breakdown for you to understand what it is and help you break the habit and get you flourishing financially and actually having the life that you really want. Because a lot of us are very deluded about the lives we really. When I win the pools, it's one I get all the time. When I win the lottery, and I go, what will you get? The wanting is the winning of the money. But actually, meanwhile, their lives are on hold. I really hope that's been helpful, and I will be doing more. And please subscribe and ask me any questions. Thank you.